No, it's your two favorite people, James and Chris.
How you doing? How you doing?
Hot Takes Podcast, live streaming commentary for the Red Sox Rays game. James, let them know what's happening right now.
Well, literally, as soon as we get on, Nelson Cruz gets a pitch thrown at his head. So that's a lovely way to start off. That's great.
I love that.
You know?
I love that so much.
Right at his face. Like this guy was ducking out of there. So, but no, I mean, it's been a good week. It's been a weird week. Definitely adjusting to life on the East Coast. So, yeah, I'm back for a little bit from Arizona. I'm going to be spending the summers now out here.
East Coast, Best Coast.
It's going to be a lot easier for us to do these live streams moving forward. So
way easier. Same time zone.
It's going to be fantastic. So Nelson Cruz is the ageless wonder, basically. You know, he's having one of the best years of his career this year, as he has last year and the year before. The guy's like 41 years old. Like by far the oldest guy, a regular position player in the major leagues, and he's having one of his best years. Like this guy might not ever break down. He just might retire, you know, just because he's tired of playing. You know, like
I'm tired of being good. I'm just tired of playing this game.
It's happened before.
I believe it. No, I do believe it. That's the thing is, I that could very well much be the truth. Like,
it just never happens at that age. You never see it. So we just got done with the inning. So, Chris, I want to tell you a little bit about what I've been doing recently. Some of this baseball work. Yeah, I've been going through and I've been looking at the differences of players before the spin rate drop, before they took spider tack out of the league, and then after. I've been trying to figure out which of the guys are never going to be the same again. Mm-hmm. You know, guys who used to be aces and now they're number threes or number fours. You know, it's not a bad thing to be a really good number three. But if you're making, you know, these elite player lists, you need to be elite talent. So there's been a lot of moves. There's been a lot of movement on the lists.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, you know, the whole theory that I have about players going from being very aggressive to being more controlled and in the zone and peaking out that way, it seemingly is holding true. You know, recent examples are like Willy Adames, but, you know, you can even look into guys who are having killer second halves who are just physically very strong people, like Pete Alonso. That's another one. But also Chris Bryant, I think he's going to be going off for the Giants. They just added him. I mean, we got the trade deadline to even talk about because so many moves happened. Yankees got Gallo. Yankees got Rizzo. Dodgers got Trey Turner, Max Scherzer. Javi Baez went to the Mets. I mean, these are colossal moves, and I think Javi Baez is going to be one of the next players to make that adjustment from being very, very aggressive to working your way in zone and becoming, you know, elite in zone. I think Starling Marte made that adjustment in recent years, and we're starting to see even Miguel Sano. He's having a pretty big last month after being, you know, his usual well over aggressive self for the first 100 games of the season. So his swing might finally be there enough for his power to fully play. So there's quite a few guys who are kind of rounding into form, especially as pitching kind of bounces back to where it should be. I mean, the way that I see it about this spin rate drop, you know, the lack of spider tack in the league for pitching, the fact that like 70% of the league's pitchers were using these guys. These guys were using it. 70% of the league was using it. So what does that sound like to you? Sounds like steroids.
Yeah.
Oh, it uniformly was used throughout the game, and now it's not. So everything's evening out to where it should be. And I remember growing up, one of the biggest ideas that I had about the future of baseball was that at some point in time, because the arm, your shoulder ligament can only withstand about 40 pounds of pressure. I believe it's 40 pounds, but there's a limit to it. Whereas if you're using your entire body for hitting, you should be able to generate, more and more and more and more swing speed, strength, all of that. So I came to the conclusion quite a while ago that at some point in time, hitting was going to start out distancing pitching, even without steroids. And pitching was able to come back to a certain degree after the steroid era ended, and batters were not using it. But now that they are not using spider tack, we're really starting to see the difference. We're starting to see the fall off. We're starting to see quite a few players go from being exceptional to
average.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Kevin
I hate to say it, but I'm like
Kevin Gausman. Yeah, Kevin Gausman is one of the bigger ones if we're talking about all of them. Because before before the rules were put in, he was pitching like one of the best pitchers in the league. He was striking out everyone, wasn't walking people, low ERA, low FIP, low XFIP, low xERA, low SIRA. I mean, everything checked out for him. But literally to the day that they stopped allowing it, his walk rate's doubled, his strikeout rate has changed. All the balls hit in play against him have higher rates of success. Just it's a completely different pitcher before and after. So like quite a few pitchers who I even thought had taken the next step this year have regressed. So if we're looking at the best say 300 players in the game, it's maybe like 30, 35 of them that are starting pitchers, at least that are in the majors. The rest of the starting pitchers are in the minor leagues. And I'll tell you, there is a significant collection of them down there that are talented, but the big leagues are another animal. So I'm going to have to go case by case with those guys over the next week or so and evaluate them.
I feel like we always wind up rounding around this this kind of idea. You've thrown it out several times in past podcasts, and you're always like, the major league is a completely different animal. And you say it all the time, and it just really makes me think, what are things like in the minors? What are things like in practice? And it's really funny. It's really funny because I actually have an example for this. Believe it or not, I'm going to surprise you right now. I have a pure example for this. It's not baseball related, but it's actually basketball related. And it has to do with, I forgot this guy's name. It was like Andrew something, and he was a basketball player like way back in the day. And he was like the worst person at the time in basketball. He was the worst person in the NBA. But he was still in the NBA. And I remember a bunch of people talking a lot of garbage, and they're like, oh, if we see you on the court, we're going to destroy you. Like, how do they let people like this into like a sport and stuff like that and everything? And it's like, well, he may be the worst in like national basketball, but apparently it takes a completely different type of athlete to even play at that level, because no one he actually for fun wound up, I have to get the name of this guy so we can talk about it, we can post about it. But he wound up for fun reaching out to some fans and being like, hey, play me on the court. Like, I'll come see you. And he like demolished these people. and it was like sad. It was like really like he destroyed these people. And then it was like a whole kind of like 10-minute talk about how like being a professional athlete, whether it's in like the Major League Baseball level or like in the actual NBA, or just being at that highest tier level of a sport, where it's like you're not playing in the minors, you're not playing on these small interstate teams and stuff like that and everything, and it's just like these major league athletes are just, they're on a different level. They're absolutely beasts.
Yeah, the way I quantify it for people who really want to understand it in like a short statement is, if you're looking at the best of the minor leagues, if you're looking at the top 100 minor leaguers, they move fairly quickly, and you'll see them put up good numbers at each of their levels. But the big leagues has the best of the top 100 prospects from the last 20 years. So, and not really last 20, it's more like last 15 years, but they get to the big leagues and they stay there. And most of the time they get better if they're the really good ones. So for you to go from, doing well in the minor leagues while, moving up to doing well and staying good at the big league level, I mean, that's a massive leap.
Mm-hmm.
A massive leap in competition. It cannot be overstated. It's a massive leap. And that's why, you have to have so many things checked off as a minor leaguer before you get promoted. At least in my opinion, you have to have proper swing mechanics. You have to have a good enough eye. You have to have a sound approach that you're committed to. You have to have physical conditioning to withstand the full season. You have to have put up numbers relative to your league. That's really important, relative to your league. Because if you put up good numbers, but if they're not good relative to your league, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And you get promoted while you're ready. At that point, when you're ready, you get promoted. No rushing, You deal with a guy like that, they typically pan out. But to have all of those things go in your favor, including, a toolsy enough profile that, once the league adapts to you, you'll be able to, further adapt and express those tools in different ways. It's very few people are able to have that skill set. And in my opinion, we've actually kind of passed what I'd call the peak for that type of athlete. I think as of I think maybe a year or two, no, I won't say a year ago. I'll say like 3 years ago. As of 3 years ago, between the minors and the majors, there was the most amount of professional talent in Major League Baseball history. And now I think we're at this point where some of that talent is starting to separate out, and the overwhelming majority of the best talent is at the big leagues. Because if you're in the minors and you're a big league talent, they can recognize that pretty quickly, and they can let you grow at the big league level, which is not something that I'd encourage. But if they move you quickly enough through the minors where you're clearly ready, there's no indicators that you're being moved too quickly, right? Then call them up, based on those grounds. But I've never been the kind of guy that believes in rushing a prospect just because their tools look good. That being said, if the guys who are good enough prospects, they dominate at each level, so they do move very quickly. So you never see a level stay very strong for very long, even if it's double A and triple A are a completely different animal compared to even A ball. So that's one big leap, going from A ball to double A. And it's a smaller leap, but yet still a leap to go from double A to triple A. Because triple A has a lot of guys who are not quite good enough to be big leaguers, but they're smart enough to be big leaguers. But if you can, produce in double A and triple A in the right ways with the right skill sets behind it, then you get promoted to the big leagues. And honestly, some guys, they'll come in and they'll be really effective for 1 year. Tampa Bay, one of the teams we're watching tonight, they're really good at identifying those guys. Don't get me wrong, they're absolutely fantastic at developing prospects in general, but they get these guys that come in, some lefties, some righties, and what they do is they mash their handedness before the league adapts to them, and they couple those guys with guys like Austin Meadows, top prospects, former top prospects, who can kind of just really play. And I think that's one of the advantages of the Tampa Bay front office, is that they can pick up on those types of guys who maybe they don't have the tool set to be long-lasting big leaguers, but they have everything else that you would need to be short-term difference makers at the big leagues. They're really good at picking up on that, because if you can do that, at least have those guys be difference makers against the handedness that you need them to be. Then you can go lefty righty throughout your lineup. It's very hard to pitch to that, even if you're a high level pitcher. But yeah, you'll see guys who are like polished first, as in not toolsy guys, just guys who have been there and done that and produced. They'll come up to the big leagues and they'll be effective for 1 or 2 years. If they can't make massive adjustments, they become about league average hitters. The best that they can be effective against is their handedness. And that, kind of brings us back to the point that I mentioned on our other show.
Mm-hmm.
I think the last time we might have talked was we might have talked about this, how if you are just, one of those guys who's just a gym rat, right? You're really strong. Maybe you're not as toolsy, as fundamental.
Legit remember this conversation.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
had this conversation.
Yeah, it's one thing to be a righty. It's a whole nother. What was that?
What happened? What did we miss?
Oh my goodness. I just watched. I don't know who was that. Oh my God, that was Yandy Diaz. So yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm off the topic here. But Yandy Diaz is at the plate, and they just showed something that he did during practice. I've never seen anything like that. He was taking infield practice, and he threw a ball behind his back from third base to first base,
What?
like fielding it. That was wild. That was.
It was during practice, though, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I feel
that's
like I
still.
just missed that.
I'll tell you, today has been the day of seeing odd third base plays. Because Nolan Arenado made a play earlier today that I've never seen anyone make. He was playing in front of third base, for the bunt. And Pineda was batting because it was Twins in the National League. And Pineda kind of chops it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Arenado gloves it in fair territory, throws to second base while in front, like he's playing well on the infield grass. He throws all the way to second base, and they turn the double play. I've never seen a play like that.
I'd be stunned too. I'm like,
yeah. But to go back to the conversation that me and Chris had the other day, you could be one of these guys that's out in the big leagues right now, where you just swing really hard, you work the count because you don't know how to have sound swing mechanics,
mm-hmm.
So you're just fouling things off that are pitches you should be hitting. And you don't swing at balls because that's just what you were told. You were told you're really strong, swing really hard at strikes. You weren't, somebody who's been playing ball forever. You're just somebody who, is that type of guy. You don't have a fundamentally sound swing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is not a profile that I can really get down with if you're a right-handed hitter. There's a couple of exceptions with that type of profile. From righties that I'll I guess let sort of pass, but even then I don't want to have multiple players like that on my team. However, it makes a colossal difference if that player's handedness is different. Because at minimum, when the league adapts to your right-handed bat and starts being aggressive with you because your swing mechanics are messed up, you're not going to hit righties, but you'll hit lefties because your swing mechanics aren't there, but you're just strong enough to get the bat head around. You'll see those pitches well enough.
And you're so funny because I'm sorry to interrupt you. You're so funny because like we've been having this conversation for so long. So if you're new to the live stream or you're new to the podcast and everything, like listen real close because it's like it all revolves. Just James is like just sprinkling that little bit of like here it is. Like this is what's happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. If you don't understand platooning, then a lot of lineup decisions will just go straight over your head. And there's players, then they have their profile, patient, aggressive. But it doesn't really necessarily matter what your, patient, aggressive profile is if you just can't hit righties.
Yeah, we have a hot take in the chat right now.
Oh, here we go. What's up?
So, hey James, it is formerly Travis Perweiler. I'm glad what the Yankees did at the trade deadline. Plus, here is a hot take. Mariners win the division.
Oh man, I would love to see that. I would love to see that. I don't know if it can happen, especially now that Starling Marte is on the Oakland A's. I mean, he's been really killer, but would I love to see it? I absolutely would love to see it. Seattle deserves to be in the playoffs. It has been way, way, way too long. And I'll tell you, if they can't do it this year, they definitely have a massive shot next year because I think by mid-June-ish, maybe early July, I think Julio Rodriguez will be up. The reason why I say at least mid-June is because they're going to delay his service time to give him as many years under contract as possible. And I think his bat's just about as good as anyone in the minors. But I think that's what they need. They need that one really big bat to shape everything else that they're doing in their lineup around. Like Kelenic was supposed to be that, and I think people are like a little bit disappointed that he is not that right away. I think he can be that, and I think putting him lefty righty with Rodriguez is going to be the way to go for the future. Mm-hmm. I also think that what Cal Raleigh did at catcher for them this year is major. Because if Seattle doesn't have a catcher moving forward, it's hard to win without a solid foundation at catcher and up the middle. I also am expecting more things, more good things out of J.P. Crawford. He just needs to make his swing more consistent. Because he can have great swing mechanics, but they're so inconsistent that his launch angle varies. He doesn't have a very good launch angle. But overall, I mean, Seattle has so many good pieces that, next year, I think absolutely division is totally in reach. I don't think that Bregman's ever going to be the same. I don't think that Correa is ever going to be the same. Those two specifically have dropped off. Like the last time Bregman played, he had gone from being, I'm going to be productive, walk a lot, and pull all the contact that I make, basically be a mistake hitter. And then when pitchers realized that he had changed his approach to be exclusively that, and they started attacking him, he stopped being able to hit righties altogether. If you look at his splits right now for the season, he's not hitting righties. If you look at Carlos Correa went through a really interesting progression of trying to be an effective hitter again. He used to be, aggressive, make contact, and the contact's good. And then recent years, he started becoming a little bit more patient to get to more power, which is a normal progression, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when they caught him cheating, his numbers dropped off against righties, as did really the rest of the team's numbers against righties. And he came into this year, and he initially wasn't really doing the best. But then as the year went on, he started fouling off more pitches, not swinging at balls, changing his approach exactly the same way that Bregman had changed his approach exactly the same way that Josh Reddick had changed his approach post-cheating. Just, I'm going to become really patient and wait for a pitch that I know I can hit, because tough pitches I can't hit anymore because I didn't know that they were coming. And now, I'm basically a glorified AAA player. But yeah, so what ends up happening is Correa, because of how physically strong he is, and the approach change ends up paying dividends. And for a good 2 months, he's walking 16% of the time, and he's hitting for pull power. But as you look closely, during those months, he had to work deeper and deeper counts. And by the second month, the strikeout rate had even started to spike. But by the third month, he fell off a complete cliff, literally 93 or something like that % below league average. Completely fell off a cliff. The strikeouts went through the roof. The walks went straight into the strikeouts, which is a concept that I've been talking about here for a long time. That, you're fouling off pitches, so you're working the count and working to walks. Well, what happens when you can't foul those off? You're swinging and missing. Those all become strikeouts. So I think that's what we're starting to see from Carlos Correa. I mean, one term for it would be accelerated decrepitude. Most players go through this at a very slow pace over the course of their entire career. He's accelerated decrepitude. He's dying quickly, basically. Mm-hmm. Accelerated decrepitude. So seeing that from him, seeing that from Bregman, shortstop and third base aren't exactly easy positions to fill. I mean, they do have Aledmys Diaz, who's nice enough, I guess. And we're starting to see, the fall off of Altuve in the same way as we saw the fall off with Bregman and Correa. His numbers aren't quite falling off as drastically, because I think Bregman was always patient, and I think Correa had learned to be patient, but Altuve was always aggressive, and now he's going straight into patience. So it's lasting a little bit longer. But I think, by the end of the year, the separation between Altuve's first half and second half will be pretty massive as well. I don't think he'll be able to be very effective next year. I do think that Yuli will be fine, though. Mm-hmm. The Astros explained that to Yuli, they felt like he was the type of hitter that you give very little information to, and you kind of let do his thing. And I guess that very little information that they were giving to him was what pitches were coming. So now they're giving him more information about, what he can do to better his profile. And I think because he's got such amazing swing mechanics, and he's got such a history of being a great hitter without knowing what pitches are coming in Cuba, they called him the Derek Jeter of Cuba. Mm-hmm. I do think that Yuli has the ability to continue to be effective. I think that Yordan Alvarez in the minors didn't need cheating to be effective, so he'll be fine. I think Kyle Tucker will be fine for them. They bring back Michael Brantley. That could serve them really well. He's been great for them. And Chas McCormick. These are all non-cheaters. But I got to say, it is very satisfying to watch, Correa, Bregman, Altuve deteriorate before our eyes. There's not really much action going on in the Rays game. Let me update everybody on what's going on. Oh, and there are 2 outs now. So I was about to think, okay, maybe we have a rally here started by the Red Sox with a guy on
no.
and 1 out, but Devers just lined out to left. He did hit that 105 miles an hour, basically 104.6. Devers is honestly one of the best, left-handed middle of the order types in the majors, especially if you're going to just look at the guys who are under a certain age or before their prime. I think that they called him Little Poppy. They called Devers Little Poppy, or they call him that in the Boston clubhouse. And I think it's very apt. I don't think he's necessarily going to have quite the peak that David Ortiz did, but right now with the shift, to be a left-handed hitter and to be a middle-of-the-order hitter, it's not the easiest thing to do. When the shift goes away, I can only imagine how good he'll get. So he's a fantastic player. I think I heard somewhere, and I might be right about this. I'm going to double-check. But Boston, they made, I think, one really big move at the trade deadline. And I want to make sure that I read this correctly, because if they really did this move, it looks like it. My goodness. Wow. Let me just double check this. I'm checking it in 2 places, because one place they don't properly report things. Yep, there we go. Yeah. So, Chris, I don't know if you know this, but Boston got Kyle Schwarber.
I had heard something. I've been seeing a lot of trades, a lot of talk about trades today.
Yeah.
So I probably read about it, but
a lot went down. So, speaking briefly on this, Schwarber's hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Why, he's not playing right now. And Boston's moving him to first base, which is a brilliant idea. But as far as left-handed hitters go, if we're talking about big leaguers whose swings remind me of David Ortiz, Schwarber is a much more comparable swing to Big Papi. And I think now that he's, in Fenway, and it's really the perfect team for him. And that's a scary middle of the order. That is a scary, scary middle of the order. Because from the left side, you have Schwarber, you have Verdugo, Devers. From the right side, you got Bogarts, you got JD Martinez, you got Renfroe. Renfroe hits lefties, so there's that. He's starting to get better at hitting everyone. But.
We have Travis back in the chat.
Hey, Travis. Good.
He's telling us that he loves seeing Altuve stink.
Right? I know. Greatest. When I watch, we're in the New York-ish area, Chris, right?
Yeah.
So there's a commercial here, a Yankees commercial, where I think it's like a Verizon wireless commercial, one of the cell phone carriers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know which one, but it's one of them. And basically,
it's probably Verizon.
It might be.
It's probably Verizon.
So it's Aaron Judge and it's Stanton.
It's definitely Verizon. It's definitely Verizon.
And they're talking, right? And they're talking about how what makes me feel confident or whatever at the plate, right? And Aaron Judge is like, oh, I go watch the Little Leaguers play. And I remember back to when I was in Little League and how confident I felt at the plate then. And like, what Stanton hears is like, I go back and to Little League games and I think about how much I can crush the pitchers and like I crush them in the game or something. So in the commercial, you see Stanton just hit a massive dinger off a Little League pitcher. And at the end of the commercial, he picks up the third baseman and moves him out of the way and tells him, "That's not where you're supposed to be, buddy," before stepping on third. And I'll tell you, every single time I watch that commercial, I just imagine him doing it to Altuve. Just when you're running around the bases, just like if he's close enough to a base.
Oh, Travis is saying it's T-Mobile. We're wrong.
There you go.
We're wrong. It's T-Mobile.
Just pick up Altuve and be like, "You're not supposed to be here, buddy. Go back down to the minors. You're not meant to be in the big leagues, cheater." Yeah. I just picture it every time, though. Every time, just him picking up Altuve. It's not where you're supposed to be, buddy. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. All right, so we got Tampa Bay now batting here. I mean, so far it's been a pitcher's game. Nobody's scoring anything. And we're in like the bottom of the third inning. This is pretty far in for both of these teams to not have scored. Boston is definitely an offense, and they have a diverse offense too, but it's diverse in a different way than Tampa Bay. See, Tampa Bay, I think we said this earlier. Lefty righty, lefty righty. That's Tampa Bay. Okay, Boston, they do the lefty righty too, but they don't scramble up the lineup. They don't change all of that type of stuff on the day-to-day, and they pay much more attention than Tampa Bay does to things like defense and base running, and much less attention to complete lineups. If you're looking at the middle of Boston's lineups, basically the same 5 guys every day, 4 or 5 guys. Well, I think it's really like 4 guys, but it's about to be 5 with Schwarber. So I think everybody really knows how to do their job on a day-to-day basis. That's one of my big criticisms about Aaron Boone, is that if every day you change up somebody's role, how are they supposed to know whether their job is to get on base to be driven in, or to do the driving in? I mean, you could be like, all right, well, my lineup spot tells me that I'm supposed to get on base today, but tomorrow my lineup spot says that I'm supposed to drive guys in. So how are you supposed to get any sort of consistency with your skills? You have to be patient and aggressive, back to back to back to back to back. You're never going to figure out who you are. You got to commit to an approach. Boston understands that. So they may not have what I'd call, the deepest team in talent. They have a very balanced team. And in a league where big league teams just like to stack players who can hit homers, having an overall balanced team, it goes against the grain. It gives them an edge.
Mm-hmm.
I think, a lot of people, they think about cumulative statistics, how many home runs you hit by the end of the year, how many runs you score by the end of the year, but it's really who you score them against and in what moments. It's really about winning ball games. And, obviously your team's not going to be able to win the number of ball games that you're going to need if they can't score enough runs. But you don't need to be the number 1 team or number 2 team or number 5 team in runs in order to be a World Series winner. So now the way I think about it is this, the Moneyball theory, while as great as it is, it looks at things from one end of the spectrum, the results, not the process. The results, to have results on a certain level are fantastic. But if you don't have the process, the results won't come against who you want them to come against and what caliber of competition specifically you need them even to come against. And, we wonder why, Oakland keeps making the playoffs all these years since Moneyball. They're incredibly successful at making the playoffs regularly. But why do they never win a World Series? It's because Moneyball does not work unless you're using the other side as well. If you're optimizing how to get to the results, having the perfect process, and you're getting enough results, you should steamroll competition. Like if you're looking at the Kansas City Royals in 2015, they went against like basically the picture of what a Moneyball team is in the World Series, which is the Mets that year. There's a bunch of older guys who hit for power, who get on base. They didn't necessarily have the greatest defense. They had good enough pitching, though. And that was supposed to be enough in a Moneyball era. The Royals made them look silly. because the Royals had people who knew their roles. The Royals had just enough lefty righty, and the Royals maximized everything that they were doing. So anytime anyone was on base and a single was hit, that guy, A, he had enough speed to maximize that single, but B, he knew, hey, the guy who's coming up is supposed to drive me in. So if he hits it, I better be taken off. So they'd go first to third or first to home sometimes. And just a single against an elite arm doesn't seem like much. But when you have anyone on base doing those types of things, and you have enough people in your lineup where they know their roles either to get on base and then run, and then the rest of them know that they just need to knock in the runs, it becomes very hard to pitch again against the same exact lineup. It's not just that they had those guys. They didn't have people sitting on the bench. Those guys played every day. And if we're even comparing them against Boston, Boston has people like Marwin Gonzalez and, as much as I like him, Enrique Hernandez and Christian Vasquez playing. The Royals, they even had Omar Infante playing. But the point being is the Royals had Moustakas, Hosmer, Sal Perez, guys who their whole careers in ahead of them. And, at least in Sal Perez's case, he had his prime ahead of him. When you're dealing with aggressive hitters in big moments, they can dial in to who they're supposed to be, even if it's not as consistent because they still haven't mastered the strike zone. In big moments, you need to produce. So you're not going to be swinging at balls. So that's why Sal Perez was so clutch for them. That's why Hosmer was so clutch for them. That's why Moustakas was so clutch. I mean, across the board, they had the right balance. They had the right amount of base running. They had the right defense. But if you look at those guys' totals, how many of them hit above 270? How many of them had that, all-world on-base percentage? Like none of them. I won't say none of them hit above 270, but not very many of them. Even if you're looking for power, how many of them had a 500 slugging? I mean, we're in the era where power's everything, right? How many of them had a 500? I think maybe one. So I think we need to examine production differently. Otherwise, I fear that we're going to get into an era where, because of what people's results have been in the past, that we end up wasting talent in the present. Put a bunch of great stars on one team, but it's not balanced. They never do anything. They never win a World Series. You end up wasting great careers. I mean, hey, but they get paid, right? I don't think that, come on, man, So, hold on, Chris. I can't hear you. Something off with your microphone.
Oh, what just
There
happened?
we go.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
that was a little odd.
What
Yeah.
just happened? But whatever. I said I totally agree with your point.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's wise or fair to stack an entire team with the best of everything in the league, and it's there's going to be some conflicting plays and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, it's just more if we're looking at the way that it the way this would look if we're looking at, okay, let's lead these facts and the way that the league does things down the direction that we can. So if you're not doing what the Red Sox are doing, you're not doing what the Royals are doing, right? If you take the Moneyball formula and you max it out, right? You either deal with the issue that the Yankees were having, where it's all right-handed batters, it's all the same types of patient approaches, and they just couldn't consistently win because as a pitcher, you could fall into rhythms about what you would need to do and you would make less mistake pitches. And with the lineup diversity being, mixed up all the time, as in one day you're going to bat leadoff, one day you're going to bat fourth, nobody could settle into the proper role in order to get any sort of consistency built up. Mm-hmm. So as a total, the whole lineup just didn't properly perform. Now they're in a little bit better of a situation because they brought in Odor, who's been fantastic from the left side. Gardner hasn't been a good factor for them this year, a good player for them this year, outside of just 1 month of the season. So bringing in Gallo to basically take his lineup spot and be a lefty is really big. Voigt's been hurt, and we need another lefty in there, and bringing in Rizzo was a brilliant idea. So now there's enough lefties righties going on in the Yankees order where they should be all right at this point. But the side effect of it is the majority of the players in the Yankees lineup are pretty patient. They're not exactly going to swing at balls. So um, none of the hittable pitches that are on the edges of the strike zone, they're really going to try and go for it. So you're going to deal with a lot of three true outcomes. You're going to deal with a lot of strikeouts. You're going to deal with a lot of walks. You're going to deal with a lot of home runs. But we've said this before: home runs and walks, in large part, are mistakes. And you want hitters to be able to hit against the best pitches, thrown. You want hitters to be really phenomenal at hitting the ball optimally. And I feel like I worry that being three true outcomes with this much of the lineup could put you at a disadvantage against certain arms. But then again, we are in the era where Spider Tack coming out of the league.
Spider Tack.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it could make it so, even being a patient hitter, it doesn't matter. You're able to hit anyone. So it could change things for a couple of years, even with regards to patient guys who are just basically gym rats. But I think that'll change once pitchers start being in the league, not because of their stuff, but because of like pitch combination. If you're throwing one pitch 95 and then the next pitch is like 80, and you can mess around with some breaking stuff, maybe even go east and west on a fastball, or add in a changeup there. The point is, if you keep a batter off balance, they have to rely on their swing mechanics and the coordination in their body. And guys who don't have that, who are just gym rats, who just hit the ball hard and only swing at strikes, it'll become harder and harder for them to contribute in the league. But we may see like a short-term kind of boom for those types of guys, given what's going on with pitching throughout the league. So I do got to say, though, that the Dodgers are starting to get the right idea with what kind of players to add. They kind of started to have the right idea with what players to add like a year or so ago. And then they kind of went back to their old ways. They went out and got Trevor Bauer. And, they built their pitching staff the way that they did. And now I think they're starting to understand that they can't just get guys who have low ERAs. They have to get big game arms who also have low ERAs. So they went out and got Scherzer, which was, the most brilliant move that they could have made. They went out and they got Trey Turner. So now they have the most speedy, dynamic off. I think they should probably win the World Series again, 2 years in a row, be the first team to do that since the 99-2000 Yankees. But one of the big criticisms that people always had about the Yankees during those years, or after those years, rather, post-90s years, was that the Yankees bought their teams. In the 90s, the Yankees never bought their teams. They traded for guys. They developed guys. But, once you got to 2001, 2002, 2003, we bought all of our teams. But we didn't buy championships. The Dodgers will have basically bought championships for all intents and purposes the last 2 years. So some of me is like, oh, it's cool. We finally see another dynasty. But the other part of me is like, I would have liked to see it a little bit differently. So get back to the game. Tampa Bay just scored a couple of runs.
Has anything interesting been going on? Like, I feel like we've been talking off topic.
Nothing too exciting.
Yeah, this isn't like the last game. It's.
Oh, definitely not.
Definitely not.
But hey, we can talk about this though. It's McClanahan versus Renfroe at the plate, and Renfroe specifically, he toasts lefties. That's his career. That's what he's done. That's who he's been. And McClanahan, he's a lefty. He's thrown well over 100 miles an hour. I saw him throw, I think, 102 live earlier this year. He's got some pretty incredible stuff, especially for a lefty. And and that's the other thing. Like we talked about Ohtani earlier this year, and I made the mistake of thinking that he was lefty pitcher and batter. He's just lefty batter. So seeing him throw 100, I thought he was throwing 100 as a lefty. Now my mind was blown, but this guy, he actually can throw 100 as a lefty. And he just allowed a home run to Renfroe. And that's the advantage. That's the handedness advantage. You can throw 100 as a lefty, but if you're throwing it straight down the middle to a guy who toasts you and is a righty who just, that's what he does. Righties hit lefties. That's usually the way it is. For a guy like Renfroe, like all he's got to do is groove his swing properly. Because if it comes in at 97, you can send it out a lot faster. And he sent it out a good 7 miles an hour faster than that, 104. And that was like a fastball that did not break plane at all at the top of the zone. He just had a perfect swing for it. So now we got a game. It's official. We got a game. 2-1. Okay, let's go.
Oh, let's go.
Let's go. Talking about pitchers around the league, I did want to bring this up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
In my analysis, like for quite a while, Chris, I talk about, okay, he's a good hitter, but who can he hit?
Yeah, you talked about that for a while.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the same deal for pitching. Like, if you're a really great pitcher, right, but you don't pitch well against, the best lineups out there. You don't pitch well against, the best teams and big games and all of that, then I feel like I should almost knock you down a tier. Like, if you're putting up an ace-level ERA, but in big games for trackable reasons, you get blown up, as in like concrete trackable reasons.
Yeah.
I feel like you should not be an ace. You should be a number 2. I feel like you should knock someone down one tier for that.
Interesting. Explain.
I mean, you can win a whole bunch of garbage time games during the season, right?
Yeah.
But just like being, a hitter and hitting a whole bunch of garbage time home runs, that doesn't really mean that you're a great player. It just means that you're succeeding against guys who probably shouldn't be in the big leagues. In some cases, these pitchers, they do succeed, for the whole season against, guys who are even good players. Kershaw's probably a great example here. He succeeds during the whole season against all sorts of guys. But once he gets past, I'm going to say about inning number 165 on the season, maybe 160 on the entire season, he becomes a different pitcher. And in games after that point, by pitch number, I'm going to say 65 to 75, he's not the same guy. He's tired. And I think that affects every game after he's pitched 160, 165 innings. And in the playoffs, that means you have to take him out by like the 4th inning in the game. And they regularly leave him into the 7th inning. And then in the 7th inning, 3rd time through the order, 6th inning, 3rd time through the order, he always gets lit up for like 3 runs. And if he's allowed any runs earlier in the game, that's not a good situation. And there's multiple reasons, and I've discussed this, I think, why Kershaw has this happen to him. Part of it, he's tired, obviously, right? And part of it is, the number of pitches that he's gone into a game at that point in time. But part of it is also his handedness. He's a left-handed pitcher in a league of power-hitting righties. So 3rd time through the order, that really does make a difference. And then the second thing is, it's not just that he's a lefty in a league of power-hitting righties. It's that he's mainly a 3-pitch guy. And all of those pitches, the reason why they're so dangerous, it's not just because, well, he has a great curveball shape. That's one big thing. But outside of the curveball shape, each pitch works so well because each of them is 10 miles an hour off the last one. So when he can't throw his fastball as fast, it ends up not making the changeup play that well. And one or the other gets to be hittable. And the other side of that is when you can pick up that it's either a changeup or a fastball, just enough at least to foul it off, then the curveball ends up looking very, very different. And essentially you have a 2-pitch pitcher with the second pitch being a looping breaking ball that loops into righties from a lefty. And late in game doesn't properly break plane, especially now that we have lowered seams and lack of spider tack in the league. So Kershaw, for a variety of reasons, is not exactly a late season big game arm. But I'm sure if they found ways to completely rest him during the season, and he was able to be, his healthy self mid-season form for the playoffs, he would do fine. But with all of these factors, year in, year out, he's not in a good state when the playoffs come around. And this is kind of why for a minute I was worried about the Dodgers in general, because they had Kershaw and they also had Bauer. And Bauer's a guy who he pitches to scouting reports perfectly. I mean, that's what he's known for.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that he doesn't understand. I mean, as a pitcher, you can't really fault him here, but he doesn't quite understand that batters will change who they are based on how they know they're going to be pitched and based on the situation. Okay? So if you're a batter and hey, my usual weakness is this combination of pitches, or my usual weakness is breaking balls in the outside corner low and away, or right, then that's the way that Bauer's going to pitch you. So if you can make that adjustment, knowing that he's going to pitch you there, tend to have success against him. And it is also worth mentioning that Bauer's ERA got significantly lower after he started saying, after he stopped making fun of Garrett Cole for using that spider tack stuff. So I think it's very clear that Bauer was one of the people using it. Just like Cole and just like, a lot of these other guys. But I do think that it has a much higher probability of affecting his ERA based on, the fact that he doesn't make those adjustments than, it affecting someone like Cole.
I actually want to circle back to something you said. I've noticed that in a lot of our podcasts and live streams, you're really big on this and you kind of skip over it sometimes. And you had mentioned before you were like, maybe they're playing with players who don't belong in the major leagues. And it's kind of like, how do you define a player? How do you identify a player that actually should be brought back down to the minors? Like, hey, maybe you have some more techniques to work out. Maybe you have some.
So many players in baseball should be sent back down. Usually,
you're like, all of them. Send them all down.
Usually it's contract reasons or personal preference. Like sometimes a player doesn't want to go back down because the conditions at the minor leagues are very different. Players don't want to take pay cuts, and big league clubs don't want to pay guys a lot of money who are not on the big league roster contributing. I think some guys won't ever really achieve who they're supposed to be, but they could get better from time in the minors. And I think a lot of guys just won't accept minor league contracts once they've played in the big leagues.
Mm-hmm.
They think they can make the adjustments at the big league level, so they're not really assessing their own ability correctly. So there's a lot of reasons that a lot of players just don't go back down to the minors and work on things. I think it's probably the best answer that I have for you, because there's plenty of players. I mean, these guys are humans, okay?
Yeah.
If you sent most of these guys down and had them work on fundamentals level by level, and you put them at like A ball, maybe they'd be big league ready by 35. But like if you had them working on perfect swings, if you had them working on coordination exercises, if you had them, right, if you really dedicated time and effort to each and every single one of them to make sure that their diet was good, that they were doing coordination exercises like that go beyond hitting, they go into fielding even, base running drills that would make you better at not just rounding bases, but figuring out how long on average it takes certain guys to throw the balls back into the bases, like Bryce Harper used to do. Like there's all sorts of little things that you can do to up your ability. Like there are some guys who are not particularly fast, but they're fantastic base runners, just simply because of what they know how to cut the bases. They know, oh, that goes into the gap, I can take two here. Like they don't steal, but they do everything else. So there's a lot of guys. Most guys, since these are humans you're talking about, If you have them, work for long enough on the right skills, sure, they could come up and do stuff. But at the beginning and the end of the day, um, there's so many barriers stopping those types of things from happening.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so many of the right coaches delivering the right messages. There's only so many people who are willing to go back down to that level. There's only so many teams that are willing to believe in players like that, believe that they're going to have the effort to do that. Because again, there's also only so many players that are going to have it in them. Once they're at the big league level, to just day in day out be okay just working on themselves. Like there are a lot of the contract, obviously the contract issues. There are a lot of different reasons why this doesn't happen. A lot of different reasons. And I guess it just, it goes to say like the guys who have played this game the longest and who perfect the fundamentals at the youngest, levels, those guys, they generally have the ability to stay in the league the longest.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing the fundamentals and having the fundamentals down is not a small thing. It's the difference between being a physically built human that just joins baseball and comes up for like 3 years and then is never a big leaguer ever again, and somebody who could be up for like 15 years, could be a big leaguer for 15 years, even if it's a bench player. So the fundamentals are just cannot be overstated.
That's really interesting because I actually always wanted to talk to you about that because Major League Baseball is one of those sports where there's like the minor leagues, the major leagues, and then a bunch of other smaller leagues that are known to fans and stuff like that. But like other sports don't really have that.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. Like if you have like the NFL, don't get me. I mean, I'm not a really huge football guy.
Mm-hmm.
But NBA, NFL. Am I wrong here in saying that it's basically college to the pros?
So there's college to the pros, and then I know that there was like another league started. I forget what it's called, but there was a whole entire other league started. I forget what it's called.
So yeah, so that's what you got. Well, for baseball, there is college ball, which is certainly decent.
Mm-hmm.
But then there is rookie ball. Then if you've done well in rookie ball, you go up to A ball or low A, and then from there you go to high A. And then from there, you go to double A. From there, you go to triple A. And then you go to the big leagues. But if you are one of those people where, they still won't bring you up even after you're doing well in triple A, sometimes it takes going to Japan to get recognized. And even then, if you go to Japan, you really have to put up numbers in most ways in order to get a big enough contract to play for a few years again in the U.S. And at that point, big league teams won't really invest in you. Not at least in my opinion, the way they should. Like, I think it's kind of a travesty that a team that has lineup protection, like legitimate lineup protection, that no team that had that ever gave Eric Thames a legitimate chance. Like, there were teams that had good teams, decent teams, the Brewers, where they brought him in and he had a good year his first year where the league didn't really know him. But that was a guy that I always thought were like, he really knew, I'm going to swing at these are strikes. I'm going to not swing at these are balls. I have a refined approach. I have a fundamentally sound swing. If I get more pitches to hit, I'm just going to hit more doubles and homers. And I felt like he was almost like one of the exposed players in that lineup. Mm-hmm. Like he needed to be like the sixth best hitter on his team, seventh best hitter on his team. And now he's playing in Japan. So it's just certain players I feel like the league doesn't value because of one reason or another. Like Eric Thames would have consistently been one of the better defensive first basemen in the league. He offered a left-handed power bat, which is something that the league needs. He was fast for a first baseman, which is, again, something that the league needs. A position that's not particularly fast to be made faster. The league needs more athleticism. And it's all about results. So they looked at his results and they were like, oh, well, He's a patient hitter, and this is only the degree of power he's hitting to. And I'm just looking at him, and I'm like, this guy had no lineup protection, and his barreled per batted ball event rate was like 17% with no lineup protection. So, you know what happens. You know, the league didn't bring Puig in. Cespedes didn't get a contract. Melky Cabrera didn't get a contract. These things happen. As long as baseball is all about results and not about how, you know, you get to the results and who you're hitting against and what types of pitches you're able to hit to, you know, succeed, there will always be players who should be in the league that end up not staying in the league. Contract expires and they never come back. Like, probably the one that really sits the most uncomfortably with me is Melvin Upton. Melvin Upton could have still kept playing, and nobody gave him a contract, and eventually he just retired. This was a guy who could play competent center field. This was a guy who would line up protection, would probably hit for power again. This was a guy who was above average base runner. He had a well above average throwing arm. I mean, he was an athlete, you know. Could have played basketball, you know. His brother's still playing. But hey, you know, his brother's a middle of the order hitter who walks and hits a lot of pull power, hits the ball very hard. So the fact that he was a leadoff hitter who specialized in, you know, base running and defense, and, you know, was a good enough hitter, got him pushed out of the league by like age 33, 34. That's messed up as far as I'm concerned. Like, he could have, I mean, imagine this, right? So he's struggling in the league. So he's like, you know what? I'm very aggressive. I'm going to keep to the strike zone. And we talk about this all the time. You have a very aggressive hitter who's succeeded with that aggression. And they're like, I'm not succeeding at anymore with this. Let me bring in patience now. And they go from swinging at everything around the strike zone to keeping it just to the strike zone. They usually do really good.
We have Avs fan 29 saying hi in the chat.
Hello. But no, he could have really been a guy, even in the second half of his career. I mean, you see guys even these days who figure it out later on. Upton figured it out early on, and he went through a little bit of a career lull. Mm-hmm. But, you know, we're in that era. We're in that era where, you know, it's just about getting on base and hitting for power. And the way that, you know, they're okay dealing with, you know, lineups hitting tough pitching is by going lefty, righty, like Tampa Bay and Oakland do. And don't get me wrong, that's cool. It's just, if people were going to build lineups the right way, I would have liked us to go closer to the way that baseball was initially made to be played, rather than further and further into hit the ball hard or walk. So, Alex Cora, the cheater, he's now talking on the thing about, you know, how great his Red Sox are, and, you know, trying to deflect from his moral incompetence. Still got a 2-1 game. Sorry, and, you know, like Kike batting. Trying to Kike batting. Yeah, that's Kike. I'll tell you, Kike is almost like a minus Zobrist. He's not quite the player that Zobrist was, but he's like a worse version. He plays like every position on the diamond. He can hit a little bit. He can run the bases, but I think the thing is with TK that I think really takes him to another level with his skill set. Look, it's one thing if you can play a bunch of different positions. It's one thing if you can hit a little. It's one thing if you can run the bases. But he's got one of the best personalities in baseball. He gets that clubhouse really, really going. He keeps everybody loose. And I've seen over and over and over again, no matter how big the situation is, it doesn't intimidate him. He produces just as well in big situations as he does in normal situations, which is an important thing for a player who's not a stud, who's just good enough. Because if he's just good enough in big situations, and he can run the bases at an above average level, and if he can play almost every position on the diamond, most of them at an above average level, he's probably one of the more underrated guys out there. Personally, I like my production levels to be a little bit higher, and I do believe that, you know, there are guys around the game who don't necessarily need to rely that much for their ability Oh, not for their ability, but rely on so much of their ability being related to how they are in the clubhouse or the different positions that they play. Like Enrique Hernandez, Kike Hernandez, he can play shortstop. He's not particularly good. He can play third. He's okay. He can play second. He's very good. And he can play all three outfield positions, and he's very good there. So he's a fantastic super utility player, and every team needs a guy like that. I'm just not sure I'd put them in the top 300 players between the majors and the minors, including pitching.
Mm-hmm.
More of like an edge player, like literally, maybe within the next 50 players. Because if you can play all those different positions and you have just enough at the plate and just enough on the bases, that's valuable, but it's not a stud. It's just behind being a stud.
Side note.
Mm-hmm.
Do you happen to have a light? You're starting to get a little dark, man.
It's starting to get dark.
Yeah, it's starting to get a little dark. I'm like,
let me put on I have this awesome light over here. It's behind me. Let's see what I can do here.
We're building up like we got
a
3 viewers. I want
them
to see your beautiful face. Like,
it's a beautiful place I'm in too.
It's a beautiful place.
I'll tell you, it's sunsetting out there over the water. It's nice being here. So, all right, it looks like a beam coming up from behind my head.
It's like a halo in one of those paintings.
Ever like play a video game and like creatures get like summoned, Yeah. I feel like I've just been summoned.
It's like the baseball god has been summoned to the live stream.
Here.
It's like I am here.
It's like just we got to draw scenes right here.
I'm always like, when are we going to take it too far?
There we go.
There we go. That's
much better.
Perfect. That's amazing.
There we go,
bud.
So yeah, no, Kike, he's a fantastic player. He's just not what I'd call quite elite. However, he would fit perfectly on that Royals team that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. People don't measure players the right way. They really don't. People out here are saying that, like, if you hit 40 home runs, it means the world. And like, all right, well, then make a team of, Chris Davises with a K and see what happens. I don't know if you know about him. He might have been like a year before you got into it. Chris Davis with a K. He was like a DH for Oakland, and year in, year out, his thing was that he would always bat 247 every year. That was his batting average, 247. And he'd do so while hitting like 45 home runs a year. And I hated him. I didn't think he was good at all. I thought that literally he was swinging out of his shoes most of the time. And if he didn't get a home run, he was going to ground out or strike out. And lo and behold, he regressed a tiny bit and he was out of the league immediately. As soon as the regression happened, he couldn't hit nearly the same rate of homers and he was useless. So it just goes to show, like, you can be really strong, but if you don't have the fundamentals figured out, it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. Even if you look at Kike Hernandez, right? He's got a fundamentally sound swing. He's got actually a pretty nice swing. I like his swing. And it works very well with Fenway Park. Part of me thinks that without Fenway, he wouldn't quite be the same guy. And that's another, reason why I'm kind of hesitant to put him on any sort of lists. Because as a right-handed hitter, you can gain a lot from Fenway Park. Like, as much as I love Dustin Pedroia, and he was one of my favorite players growing up, even though he was a Red Sox, I don't think that he would have been the same guy outside of Fenway. I don't think he would have been nearly the same player. Got so many doubles off that wall. He used to call it laser show. Oh boy,
what's going on?
We got Wander Franco at the plate. Wander Franco's been on fire like the last week or so. He started off kind of cold at the big league level after getting promoted, which makes sense because it was a pretty big promotion. Like he hadn't played at the high levels of the minors for very much time previous to this year. So he got promoted real quick relative to the fact that, his high minors time was basically this year. And as a switch hitter, it took him a little bit to get his swing in line. But now that it is, he is really hitting. People call him an 80 future value prospect. And they call him the first one in years, which means there's nothing that he does wrong and that he should be a superstar. Like for years.
What are you thinking?
I think that people don't properly know how to measure his power. I think that he's going to have fantastic walk rates. I don't think he's really going to strike out that much. I think that he's going to hit for fantastic levels of contact. I think he's going to be a good base runner and a good defender. I think that for his home run power to play, it might take a couple of seasons. I think it's going to be this year, the rest of this year, the entirety of next year. The year after that is when his power out of play will show up. But outside that, I mean, I think a lot of the assessments are pretty spot on. I just think he needs to learn how to rotate consistently in a certain way to be able to tap into the kind of power that he could. And right now, that type of power seems to be mainly opposite field. I want to see him pull more. I want to see him get better at that. He was doing it fine at the lower levels of the minors, but it's different to do it against those types of arms than to do it against big leaguers.
See, I feel like evaluating players is something everyone messes up on. I feel like players have like these hot streaks, and then everyone, you know, kind of like goes wild and they're like, "Oh, this is gonna be the best person ever since this."
It's all about boiling it down to approach.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a guy who's very aggressive and he's successful, then that's great. Okay. And if you have another guy who's very aggressive and he's not successful, at least at the beginning of the year, well, then, okay, check how strong he is and check his size, because he could be trying to get his swing plane down. And then it goes absolutely insane in the second half of the season. But if it's just like, you know, being aggressive, fouling pitches off, the only success that you get on balls in play is specifically to the pull side. You're already striking out at a high level. And that's just, you know, that if you're doing those things where there's not success in play, it's all success out of play, that means you're a pull bat. And that means that you're mainly succeeding on, you know, hittable pitches, not against, you know, really tough pitches. And if you already have a high strikeout rate, your walk rate's pretty high, there's a chance that that walk rate's going to go into the strikeout rate. And if there's any sort of dip in even, you know, a certain level, like you can hit an above average out of play power and be that type of hitter and have it not work out. You have to hit for an exceedingly high level of power to be fine with not being successful at an above average rate on balls in play. Because you really need to be successful at an above average rate on balls in play in order to be a good hitter. As long as you're batting, you know, at least, you know, I've seen guys bat 280 on balls in play, which is 20 points below league average. And they've carried like a 230 ISO, and that's been enough, right? But you can't really reduce that. You can't go with like a 220 ISO and like a 280 BABIP. That's, if you're doing those things and you're doing that with a patient profile rather than an aggressive profile, working the count and striking out, like that's dangerous territory. Any regression from that point could be really, really bad. You know, the walks going into the strikeouts, the fact that there's not a lot of power in play. What happens if some of the power out of play starts to go? Because they're not able to work the count to get to those pitches. Very risky profile. Very, very risky profile. But hey, you know, in the big leagues, that's one of the things that they love. They love home runs and they love walks. So they're willing to take the risk with certain guys. I am not a fan. That being said, if you can get guys who you know are going to be good for the short term, and you can sell them before they are not good anymore, it's a really great, it's a great strategy. It's a great way of going about things. It's just very hard to convince your owners to sell somebody who's producing.
Unless the person really pushes for leaving, of course.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I put it this way, right? Like, so to bring up the Yankees again, they have Gallo, and they have Stanton, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Stanton is showing that he's healthy. He's showing that he can play the field. He's hitting enough, and you know, if he goes on a hot streak to end the season, you know, he's same old Stanton. Um, and if I, you know, and Gallo, you know, he's at his player peak. You know, his last, I believe, like 43 hits, 19 of them were homers. That's over 57 games. So he's either hitting a home run, you know, if he's getting a hit, it's like half the time a homer. And during that period of time, he's walking a lot. He's also striking out a lot. But it's just kind of like if he does what he, you know, that level of production because of how high the on base percentage is and how high the slugging is, right? If he does that through the rest of the season, right? Whether it's him or Stanton, both of them got to go. It's going to be very hard convincing the ownership or even some people in Cashman's team to move those guys because the results are there and because they're hitting the ball hard and they're walking, they're getting on base, they're doing what the analytics say is the right things to do. But I think that if you put, you know, either of those guys up in a big situation versus like Walker Buehler, you're going to strike out. So it's just teams don't quite understand the strikeout right now. They don't understand what it means. They don't understand what working the count means. They don't understand how important it is to be successful on balls in play. So many more balls are in play than out of play.
Is there anything, not to segue back to the game, but is there anything interesting happening? Anything cool? Anything noteworthy?
I was about to mention, Kiermaier just flew out to the right fielder, and Margot, who's one of the faster runners around, he's at second base. And Renfroe, he threw a bullet back to the infield, and Margot had no chance of even trying to advance, which is something that's like that's impressive. Renfroe's always had a cannon since the draft. It's funny, when the draft happened, there were three players I wanted, you know, my Yankees to get. I wanted them to either get Hunter Renfroe, Hunter Dozier, or Aaron Judge. And I am very happy that the one that they picked to go with was Aaron Judge, because both those other two players, they're good. They're no doubt they're good. But Aaron Judge he's an anomaly. You do not find players that are 6'7" that can do what he can do. Man, look at that throwing arm from Renfroe.
Yeah.
Wow. Look at that. Wow.
Like, wow.
Yeah, right? I'll tell you, you know, that's one of the things that Boston really specialized in this year. I think it's very clear. Like, Renfroe is an outstanding defender. Kike Hernandez is a second baseman. He's an outstanding defender. You know, Verdugo, the way he's played corner outfield, is an outstanding defender. I feel like they've made outfield defense a priority again. You know, Duran is fantastic. And having, you know, in an era of the shift, a second baseman who's that fantastic. The Red Sox can do something that not a lot of teams can do. If you have a good enough guy in left field with a throwing arm, because of, you know, where the wall is in Fenway, as long as your third baseman can keep in front of him what he can keep in front of him, and anything that he can't keep in front of him, he can let go to either the shortstop or the left fielder. Third baseman doesn't have to do nearly as much, because the left fielder will keep the runner at second base. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So you can take different chances. And, you know, what misses for the third baseman to their left is the shortstop's play. So the third baseman can be better at making plays to their right, knowing that you have a short-handed shortstop like Bogart's behind you. So the way that they structured their team, knowing that Vasquez is the catcher, they have phenomenal defense. Um, I think it might be the most underrated part of the Red Sox this year, followed by their bullpen. That bullpen's about to be used, it seems like. Alex Cora is coming out to the mound. He indicates to the bullpen that they're going to bring in the left-hander. So Nick Pavetta's out of the game. Pretty decent-ish game, I guess, by Pavetta. He was facing against Tampa Bay, which is like one of the harder lineups to face out there. Almost 5 innings, 3 runs. I mean, that's a winnable game. It's not really a great start, but I'm not the biggest Pavetta guy either way. So he's decent. He's a decent arm, and he definitely got better this year. But I think of him very much more like a number 3 or number 4 starter than anything better than that. Although he was a top prospect, so there is that. Thinking about releasing a top prospect list, Chris.
I think that would probably be a really good idea.
It's been long enough.
Yeah, it's been a while. It has been a while.
I think probably the big thing for me with knowing that we're getting closer to that time to release that is that
But how fast could you produce that list? That's my
pretty
question. Yeah.
The main reason I'm really thinking about doing it is there's so few good starters left in the major leagues after all of this stuff happened, and there's so many that are in the minors and they'll be in the majors over the next year or two. But I'd like to be ahead of the curve on that, so like I could give my perspective on guys that are going to be the next wave of pitchers. Try and hold back the current hitting, because there's almost as many future aces, if you will, in the minors right now. If not future aces, number 2 starters, but good pitchers, right? As there now are remaining good pitchers at the big league level. Now, does that mean that those minor leaguers are going to pan out into what the best of the major leaguers are? Absolutely not. But the fact that it is so many, with big league pitching being what it is, I think is really intriguing, because there's a lot of teams that need pitching out there that don't have it, and they can't look to other teams to deal for it because there's just not it available. There's not enough to go around. So if you're going to look for pitching, best place to look is for prospects. So
that's pretty cool, because we used to do podcasts like that in the very beginning. We used to do there were a couple episodes in there where you did some prospects, and they were really cool. So for you to start working on a new list and get some content out there, that would be dope.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, one of the more recent excursions, and a difficult excursion at that I've been up to, is I've been trying to figure out the best relievers. Because on one side, right, you have to look at the guys who are super consistent, right? On the other side, you have to look at the guys who are emerging and it's for real, right? And then to a certain degree, you have to look at the guys who are being hurt by, the ball seams being lower, so they can't get it to break quite as much. And they're hurt by, the lack of being able to put substances on the ball. Well, I think that's a little bit easier to recover from if you are a reliever pitching 1 inning at a time than if you are a starter over 7 innings, or so, or whatever, right? So when I see somebody who, like Kevin Gausman, who dropped off after the substance, I don't think it's quite the same situation as looking at, Aroldis Chapman, who also massively dropped off. I think that with Gausman, you might not ever see that level of performance ever again. Whereas with Chapman, you might have to change a couple of things, pitch usage, his grip on certain pitches, but his stuff is so good that it's kind of hard to imagine him not being able to use it in an effective way for very long. His slider's not breaking quite as much, and his fastball, he doesn't have nearly the amount of control on. But both of them are still well above average pitches in terms of velocity and in terms of break. So I don't know. I feel like he needs to scrap the third pitch I think he needs to create a different grip with his fastball, and then find maybe a different plane to throw the slider out of, because it's moving too slowly right now across the plate. You need to have it, even if it ends up being a ball, you need to have it start closer to the batter. So long as you're not hitting them, of course. Which again, like that's kind of the tough thing now, because he doesn't have nearly the amount of feel that he used to have. Then again, Trevor Bauer insists that if you mix rosin with a good deal amount of sweat, that you can get a sticky effect that's not, don't get me wrong, it's not spider tack level, but it's sticky enough where it should be able to have at least a little bit more of a hold. But if you're throwing 100 miles an hour with a sick breaking ball, and you've been effective for years on end, and you're only pitching one inning at a time, I think you'll be able to figure it out. I mean, if anyone can figure it out, somebody with that can figure it out. Especially given that Chapman, even early on, when he was walking a lot of people and not throwing strikes, was still able to be effective. And his stuff is only a couple miles an hour off of that. So I'm not too worried about Chapman long term. Similar reason not to be worried about Edwin Diaz. Edwin Diaz is already turning it around. I just think it's a little bit different if you're a reliever. Like even Zach Britton's kind of suffering a little bit from the effects of this, but he's probably the best weak contact reliever in the sport. So if you want to think anyone can recover from it, he's definitely on that list. But yeah, I do worry about guys who have to go more than, I don't know, 2 innings max. Guys who have to go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like any starter, they are massively disadvantaged. And then of course, then there's the theory that Glass now brought up, that it might injure starters as well. And truth be told, I completely disagree with him on that. And I think that if you are uncoordinated and you are a bigger pitcher and you have to adjust your grip, you're going to be more susceptible to that kind of thing. Was that a homer? No, that's foul. Goodness gracious. That was a colossal shot. I thought that was a homer for a second. 405 feet away. Renfroe, have yourself a game. He's been good all game. I don't know what that's about. I guess he plays well in the trot. So anyway, where was I? I was talking about minor leaguers a minute ago.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's another thing. A lot of the time, rushing minor league pitchers through the minors, unlike doing so with regards to hitters. Hitters, if they hit enough at each level, can adjust. But if you rush pitchers through the minors, it can lead to really bad things. It can lead to people who are supposed to be aces being, career relievers. And that's not exactly like a terrible thing, but like, could you imagine if Alex Reyes had ended up, learning the strike zone and developing as a starter? They'd really taken their time there,
Phenomenal.
Yeah, he would have been incredible. But he's a great reliever, even with all the walks. And I think, the next example that I want to give is Nate Pearson, which is the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays had taken their time with Nate Pearson and like really slowly brought him along, level by level, instead of multiple levels in a year. I don't think he'd have to be a reliever. Now they're making him into a reliever. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Nate Pearson's going to be one of the best relievers in the sport for the next decade if being a reliever keeps him healthy. But then there's also that risk, which is, what if it doesn't? So, but he throws 103 miles an hour and he's a Blue Jay. So maybe out of the pen, he'll throw 105. He might be the next Chapman, He could legitimately be the next one. And I was talking to a bunch of, AL East fans, the other day. And I think that we're at the point in the season where I think you can pretty much figure out what the MLB standings are going to be by not the win-loss records, but the standings by the end of the season. I think it's pretty clear how to project things. So, for instance, in June,
Stephanie Scott just said hi in the chat.
hello. For June, I feel like ever since June, the San Francisco Giants went from being 8 games up in their division. Now they're 3 games up. So the Giants are dropping off like drastically ever since the Spider Tack went away. But if we're looking at that division, I don't think the Giants win it. I don't even though they're 3 games out in front. I don't think they win it. There's 58 games remaining for some teams. For the Yankees, there's 58. I think that what ends up happening is it becomes the Dodgers, followed by the Padres.
Oh, no. Stephanie said Hill the pitcher. We're talking about Hill the pitcher, not High.
Oh, Rich Hill? Yeah, I was talking about him at one point I think yesterday. But Hill's an interesting arm, actually. He's one of those guys where he was a starter for quite a few years, and now they're turning him into a reliever, and he's going to be a phenomenal one. But I think the Giants are in trouble. That's the first thing I want to say about the NL West. I think it's the Dodgers-Padres division. I think the Dodgers are going to come out in front. With Scherzer and Trey Turner, it's easy to pick them as the number 1 team in that division. NL Central, as long as people don't get hurt, it's going to be the Brewers. The Cubs traded everyone. So I think they're probably going to drop off maybe 4th place, something like that. I think the Mets are going to win their division. I think that's clear. It's been clear for a while. The AL West is a little up in the air. I think it's going to be Oakland, especially, Yan Gomes, Josh Harrison, Starling Marte. That's a massive addition to your offense, and especially when you realize that it means that Jed Lowry is your shortstop and not Elvis Andrus. I think Oakland's in a fantastic spot right now. And I think, and I've said this before, I think the Astros are going to continue to fall off. It may not be enough to give Oakland the division, but it may. So it's close. It's like the borderline. If something goes wrong with the Astros beyond what already has, I think it goes to the A's, but it's right there. For the Central, that's the White Sox. They are a phenomenal team. I could see them in the World Series this year. For the East, that's going to be Tampa Bay. Now that Franco's hitting, now that they got Nelson Cruz, Brujan and Lowe are going to be up at some point soon. Both of those guys coming through. I mean, they have Meadows. They have Arozarena, who at he's going to end up bumped to the bottom of that lineup with all the good hitters that they have. Zunino's been fantastic and very unique this year. I think last time I checked Baseball Savant, he had the highest exit velocity on average for anything put in the air, line drives and fly balls. He's not particularly good on balls on the ground, but if he gets it in the air, he's fantastic. So then Choi's having a great season. Yandy Diaz is very underrated. He's doing well against lefties. And, he's doing his usual thing. He's a very odd player, but we can talk about him at different times. He's just he's another one of those anomalies. He's just not quite a superstar anomaly. He's just a good anomaly. But that's how Tampa Bay likes to do it. They like to make it so it's tons of guys that are either great players or really difficult to pitch against. So I think they're going to win their division. I think the Red Sox are going to come in second. I think it's too big of a leap for the Yankees to make before the end of the season. But I also think that the Yankees are going to end up getting the second wild card, and I don't think it's going to be particularly close.
You still think the Yankees have a chance?
No. I think they have a chance at the second wild card, but I think they're going to get outmanaged in the playoffs. I don't think they may have the talent, but at the beginning and the end of the day, if you're consistently not using the talent properly, there's too many managers out there that know what they're doing. And it's not like, there's a reason that even when the Yankees have been at the best of their ability, they consistently lose embarrassing games that they should have won. Games that they would have had like a 94th or higher percentile for winning, and they lost in the 8th or 9th inning. And that's where their percentile was. It went from 94th, 99th, 98th, depending on what game you're talking about here, to losing the game within the last 2 innings, 2.5 innings. And I'm sorry, you can't do that as a team. You cannot have the way you lose games be like that and win a World Series. Where's going to be the confidence when you get to the playoffs? Where's it going to be? Where are you getting it from?
Mm-hmm.
And that's such a huge thing with regards to being a manager, is that you have to put your players in positions to be successful. And the success that they will get, because in a big season, putting them in positions to be successful when they have the skill set to be successful will lead to a certain amount of success. And then you can go to that player and say, see, if you do this, you can do it. And then they start to believe in themselves, and then they fall into their forms, and then you got a player. But if you keep changing up what the player is supposed to do, whether they're supposed to be aggressive or patient or aggressive or patient, they're not going to know who they are. Get to the end of the season, doesn't matter what amount of talent you have. If your team's not confident in their own abilities, you're going to lose like real quick. So it's just really sad, because I don't think I've ever seen a team with as much talent as the Yankees currently have. And I also don't think I've seen a team that had World Series amounts of talent and were this unconfident. Like, if we're talking about unbalanced rosters, then sure, like I've seen Yankees teams that like they won 100 games during the season, but there was absolutely no chance that they were going to win in the playoffs. But if you look at it, they had like 2 good relievers. They had like 1.5 starters those years. They had no defense or base running those years. So did they really have a chance? Or were they just a team built off of offense succeeding against, the Baltimore Orioles and the Texas Rangers during, the regular season? Although it's worth noting that those teams were in a completely different place during the Yankee years that I'm quoting. But if you have a team where the defense should be there, the base running should be there, the offense should be there inside in play, the offense should be there out of play. The different approaches that the player can change to depending on the situation, are effective enough where you should have big moments, and you're not winning with that team when they have a bullpen, when they have good pitching, when they it cannot be on the players. I mean, I tried to console myself the other day about this Yankee roster.
No.
I tried to just be like, it's okay, everything's all right. And it was just like, this is how I ended up doing it. I was like, okay, so Gary Sanchez, how can I be happy about this year? Well, he did emerge, but his emergence this year was more about I'm going to throw, or I'm gonna swing at strikes. I'm gonna swing at pitches that the pitchers throw for strikes, and I'm going to keep my conditioning up so I can last the whole year. He didn't necessarily quite become the player that he should have, and I think in large part, if you're looking at him, it's because his conditioning is not very good. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have good conditioning this year. He hasn't had very good conditioning last year. The only thing you could say is that this year he's building up durability, and then maybe next year he's going to add on top of that again the quick twitch, because he has quick twitch within his body. He has the swing mechanics to execute quick twitch. The issue was him lasting the full year. So I guess you can look at it being like, well, now he's lasting the full year. Now he's quality defense. He's producing. Now we just need him to be strong, So next year we'll get that. Okay, well, all right, fine. Gio Urshela and Gleyber Torres not doing as well. Well, technically speaking, that's their sophomore slumps. Sophomore slumps. LeMahieu's numbers coming down. Well, they were never going to stay that good in the first place. So that makes sense, even though it hurts. Luke Voigt and Aaron Hicks got hurt. Florial broke out, so that's cool. Greg Allen broke out, so that's cool. Stanton proved that he was healthy, but is not the hitter he used to be. Judge did Judge stuff, so that's nice enough. So Odor broke out. That's cool. Odor broke out. And we acquired Rizzo and Gallo without giving up, Andahar, who he had a wrist injury and he's going through, growth, being as aggressive as he's been. And Frazier, who's had vision issues, and you can write it up to that, But, if the only players who did what they were supposed to do, had legitimately good years, not average years, not years where they stayed healthy, but good years production-wise, healthy, good years production-wise, you're looking at, Aaron Judge. You're looking at, Odor. And everybody else either went through, massive adjustments, got hurt, had trouble seeing, sophomore slump, the whole entire rest of the team. And then, you add the players that we got in trades. Gallo is awesome and Rizzo's awesome, but Rizzo's contract's up after the year, so I doubt he stays. Gallo's there next year. But, as you can tell, you haven't exactly seen very many players here stay healthy and have above average seasons. It's really it's one guy and a guy that we added during the season, basically. That's not good. That's not good at all. If you have, I counted out there about 16 stars, or at least people who have star ability. Whoa, what a play. Well done. Goodness gracious.
What happened? Update our viewers. Don't leave
my goodness.
Hanging.
I want to make sure. Manuel Margot. Manny Margot is a center fielder. He's one of the better defensive center fielders actually out there, but Tampa Bay, because they're brilliant, they got him and they used him, mainly in a platooning type role because he hits lefties but not righties, and he's a phenomenal base runner and a phenomenal defender. But they have him out in right field right now, and he just made, a jumping catch up against the wall for throwing the ball back into the infield, stop a run from scoring. That's important in a game as close as this. And this is why I say, in order for you to have a team that's really doing what you want the team to do, you got to have players who could do these things in these moments. And in order to be able to do those things in those moments, you got to be confident. Big moment, big play like that, keeping a run off the board. If you have your players who are not confident, you've not put them in roles where they can be successful all season, you think that they're going to show up in those moments? No. So a lot of being a good player is being managed at least to a competent level. But that's kind of the whole thing. Is that it has to be to a competent level. If you're not managing to a competent level, you can really mess players' careers up. So I'm praying that it's just a 1-year blip. Praying,
What if it's not a 1-year blip? Your face says it all.
Yeah, you want to talk about wasting talent. This is worse than wasting Trout's prime because you're wasting a whole team's prime. Pitchers, hitting, prospects, everything, even acquisitions, So, I don't know. Aaron Boone's contract's up after the year. Maybe they can hire me. Dude, I'll take anyone, man. I'll take, Babe Ruth, before he died, wanted to be the Yankees manager. Maybe they can, raise him from the dead, get a necromancer up in here. You know what I mean?
What?
Get him to be our manager,
We're no longer a Major League Baseball podcast. We are now mixing in with Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, there we go. Summon the necromancer, roll a 5 or whatever, Oh, man. So Kike Hernandez is back up at the plate. He's batting 247. We should call this episode 247 or something like that. I don't know. Same batting average. I talked earlier about Chris Davis hit that every single year, hit 40 homers every single year, and was a terrible ball player. Well, now you have Kike Hernandez. He's hitting 247, and check this out. He's hitting less homers, but I don't think it would be a stretch for anyone's imagination to say that I'd rather have Kike Hernandez up with the game on the line than Chris Davis with the same exact batting average and 30 less homers. And that just goes to show you, if you have a fundamentally sound swing mechanics, if you have the right approach at the plate, you're going to succeed versus a higher level of pitching, a higher level of competition than somebody who just swings out of their shoes, chances into a 240 average, and hits 40 bombs on mistake pitches. People think about if you're swinging hard, if you don't hit it good, you'll foul it off, or you'll hit a ground ball to the shortstop, or even worse, you'll hit a ground ball to the third baseman because it'll be right to him. It'll not be properly hit. If you hit it to the shortstop, at least you probably got it on the thick part of your bat. Maybe the guy, you hit it to the shortstop, nothing good can really happen. But if you hit it to the third baseman, that's probably not hard hit at all. But then again, if you're fast enough, you don't hit it very hard, kind of squib it over to the third baseman. Maybe you run that out, infield single. So, But, point being is that if you're the type of hitter who succeeds on mistakes, big league pitching doesn't really give mistakes. Not the best arms. Some of the worst do. But you can't expect, that to be an everyday occurrence. You're not going to be facing AAA arms every day. This is the reason why having an aggressive approach with a high on-base percentage matters so much more than having a patient approach with a high on-base percentage. And I'm not even against patient approaches. It's just that most people don't take their time to slowly work into patience.
Oh, Stephanie wants to know, if you were Boone's replacement this season, what's the first thing you would do on the team?
I would change up reliever usage and the lineup.
Ooh.
And honestly, I would have advocated at the beginning of the season to, if we're going to add multiple hitters at the deadline like we did, I would have advocated for trading valuable players with Stanton to get his contract off the books. Because now there's not enough lineup spots for all the people who need to play properly once Voit is back and healthy.
Mm.
And even if you're going to stretch things in order to create the most optimal lineup for the Yankees, I doubt that that's what Boone does. As in, the most optimal lineup for the Yankees, Judge in right field, Stanton in left field, Gallo in center field, like he played with the Rangers. He's not the best center fielder. But with Stanton being a stud defender in a corner outfield position, Judge being a stud defender in a corner outfield, you just got to play Gallo back in as small of a park as Yankee Stadium is. Even though center field, it's a decently deep center field, you just play him back. He's got a phenomenal throwing arm, and he closes well on balls, believe it or not, that are hit right in front of him. He's trouble to his left and trouble to his right, which is not a concern, because you have Judge and Gallo there. So play him back. Let him use his arm. It's a good enough arm where he played third in the minors. He can also play some first. He can also play some third, I'm sure. If we could try Miguel Andújar at third, I'm sure we can give Gallo a day at third. We gave freaking Rougned Odor a day at third 2 days ago. So we can give Gallo a day at third. But outside of that, if you have Gallo in center, Stanton and Judge in the corners, that creates an opening at DH for Luke Voit. You can still keep Anthony Rizzo at first. You can still keep LeMahieu at second, Torres at short, Urshela at third, and then you have Sanchez at catcher. But if Urshela's hitting does not pick up, then all of a sudden you platoon him with Odor because they're comfortable putting Odor over there. And if you don't want to do that, I get putting Gallo there and leaving Odor in some sort of quasi platoon with LeMahieu. But I think LeMahieu with this much lineup protection actually could see a little bit of jump in his power numbers, especially that we're in the second half of the season, and he's 6'4". A lot of LeMahieu's power, it comes from him getting into full coordination and getting pitches to hit in a hitter's ballpark with as much lineup protection as the Yankees have. He's also built for the short porch. He hits so many balls to the opposite field. So I think him getting pitches now, I mean, he could get on a real roll with this much lineup protection. So for me, I use Odor in a combination at third base with Urshela, mainly because Urshela hasn't been the hitter that he's been in the past couple years, 2 years. Not like he was in 19, not like he was in 2020. He's like 6% above league average. But being as a righty,
was Odor great last week? Stephanie's saying Odor was great last week.
Oh, Odor's been great for like about a month and a half now. Joining the Yankees, getting the Yankees lineup protection, being as aggressive as he is, so he's not going to miss hittable pitches. Being in Yankee Stadium, I mean, he's been phenomenal. And I know a lot of people, when I talk about Odor, they're like, well, look, Odor's almost all of his productions against lefties as a lefty. I think that's an incredibly unique profile. And yeah, it makes for a kind of interesting a platoon because, you know, Urshela as a righty is also going to mainly hit lefties. So you might have to work Urshela into some sort of quasi platoon because Rizzo, you could use him with Rizzo. Rizzo doesn't hit like, you know what? There you go. Odor at third base and just use Urshela with Rizzo. Whenever there's a really tough lefty, you give Rizzo a day off. You use Urshela there. If you really need the defense in the later innings, you move Urshela to third. You put Rizzo in at first. That can work perfectly because Odor is not exactly a great defensive third baseman, whereas Urshela is. But Odor deserves to play over Urshela at this point in time. Even if the majority of his numbers are against lefties, he comes through in big moments versus just about everyone. And as a lefty who hits lefties, I always talk about very odd profiles and how they can play. And if you look at Odor, in normal situations, he crushes lefties. In big situations, he comes through versus everyone. He's also a phenomenal base runner. Also one of the few players in the game that at third base can steal home off of his own ability. He's got fantastic situational awareness. He's got every skill that you would need for Yankees lineup protection and their ballpark to go in his favor. He's a great. He's a phenomenal defender at second base. There's an argument that he could become a good defender at third, so it's worth at least seeing. And he adds another lefty bat to the lineup on top of everything else that he adds. I think he almost adds that Gardner factor because Gardner shows up in big situations. Gardner is a phenomenal base runner, but now that he's an infielder, not Odor being an infielder, not like Gardner, an outfielder, it gives an outfield opening for a guy like Stanton, which clears the DH spot. With Voit coming back, I just think it would be a shame for them to think that they could contend for a wild card spot and be playing Tyler Wade all the time and be playing, you know, a defunct lineup just because, you know, track record rather than what they are now. And I think, you know, if you're looking at this lineup and you're putting Odor in there and, you know, you add on top of Odor, Gallo and Rizzo, and then you realize that there is now a spot off the bench, not just for Gardner, but theoretically for the switch hitter Allen. You could start the lineup with so many lefties any day you want. So I would use that to my advantage, especially against teams that are like the Red Sox or like Tampa Bay Rays, who, you know, they use that type of strategy themselves. And yeah, I keep the lineup mostly to that. I think having Rizzo, Gallo, and Odor in there every day, having Judge in there every day, having Glaber now that he's starting to come around in there every day, having LeMahieu in there every day, having Sanchez with what he's done in there every day. You add in a healthy Luke Voigt, who hasn't really been able to get going all year because of the injuries. I mean, you're trying to create a situation where it's impossible to get through that lineup without allowing like at least 6 runs, even in big games. And I think you can really get that out of this team, but you can't keep changing the lineup every single day. Judge has to be one of the guys that's in the middle of the order to drive in the runs. Sanchez, too. LeMahieu is not a middle of the order guy. They haven't used him as such. That's fine. Odor.
Not to segue things. How's the game going?
It's really boring. It's one of the more boring games of the year.
You're
I'm not even kidding. I'm just
It's kind of sad. Our last game was really exciting. There was so much going on. I was over here on Sling. I mean, I'm still over here on Sling, but I remember I was watching and I was so excited. I was like trying to catch up to you because it was behind because it was streaming.
I'll tell you, it's just when you see games where it just kind of it just goes on and on and on, and like there's no pickup of action. There's just like, 2 runs on a double and then nothingness, and then a homer and then nothingness. That's not exciting to me. If we want to get, and this is another thing that I want to talk about, if we want to get young fans more excited about baseball, it's not about making games shorter. It's about adding more action, because they'll turn off the game in like even shorter amount of time, because that's not what people are drawn to with baseball. People are drawn to action. So if you're going to get creative, getting rid of the shift, that adds 30 hits per year, or roughly, for most power hitting lefties, most pull lefties. So that's big. A lot more base running, a lot more action. I had an interesting idea a few years back, and I was just kind of playing around with my friends. We were at a bar. We had a couple of drinks in our system, so it wasn't exactly like we were throwing stuff at a wall and kind of seeing if it would stick, And one of the ideas that we had was getting rid of DH, because the NL hates using DH, and instead having a utility position. And the utility position, like, you could change it up any inning. You could be like, all right, well, this inning, we're going to play this guy at third. This inning, we're going to, right? And you could do it, depending on skill set. So, for instance, if a guy had a really good arm, you could put them in at, whatever position you needed a good arm at. Or a guy had range, you could put, right? And you could have a utility spot instead of a DH. So the DH would still have to play the field, right? But like they'd have to, have some sort of versatility skill set, It doesn't mean that you couldn't hide offense, because you could. Teams do. In the National League, if you have a good arm, they'll put you in right field and get 2 center fielders. The 2 center fielders will take up all the range that you need, and they'll have you play back with your throwing arm. Or they'll put you at first base. So it's not like, guys who could just hit and not do very much else would leave the league. And I think that you'd get a lot more dynamic players playing in the sport. I think that would be a really fun way to go about the utility position. And then, of course, if you want to keep to the DH, that's the beauty of the utility position. You don't have to have them play the field. It's UT in the lineup. So they could just stick there as the UT and be a DH. So it creates opportunity for a lot of different things. But and then the second idea with that was keeping lineups, as big as they are, but taking one defender out of the outfield. So it's 2 ways of thinking about it. Either A, you want to create a situation where you have more dynamic athletes in the game, or you want to create a situation where if you're an outfielder, maybe you keep DH. You keep DH as a spot where you can have people who can't field. But as an outfielder, you have to now be able to play center field. You bring DH to the National League, so all those right fielders and first basemen move to DH, but you create a 2-man outfield. So you have 2 center fielders out there, creates a situation where there's more diving catches, there's more triples, there's more doubles, there's more inside the park home runs, there's more action. So there's a couple of different ways that you could go about it. Like you could have a DH spot and a utility spot, and that's how you could go with one less outfielder. Still 9 men in the lineup. But it's just interesting talking about these types of rules and these types of ways about making baseball more exciting, because I'll tell you, doing that is 10 times more exciting than putting a runner on second base in the 10th inning, or, making it so batters can't step out of the batter's box to collect themselves because you need to save seconds over the course of a game to make it a shorter game. I mean, that's made baseball worse, because you used to be able to go to a ball game, and when the batter stepped out, you'd say, oh, this guy's now got 2 strikes on him. Watch what he does to change his approach here. Or, look, see the defense is changing based on his approach. Or, you used to be able to tell somebody what was going on. And now there's not enough time in between pitches for people who know the game, who can literally say, this is probably what's going to happen. Before it happens, there's no room for us to say that. We have to rush, which, obviously takes away from other things that we could be giving. Commentary on, some of the players' background, information on some of the other players that we're going to see throughout the game. It just takes away from the overall experience. The viewership, I can't imagine, has felt good about it overall. But hey, if it saves, 30 seconds a game, ooh,
You're ridiculous. You're like, well, if it saves the time, then whatever. But it's really interesting that you're thinking from that perspective of like, hey, we have to get younger kids interested in baseball. Like, how do we keep the younger generations interested in this sport? And
with all the walks, strikeouts, and home run mistake pitches, it's not like, once a home run is hit, it's, oh yeah, home run, woo. Mm-hmm. You don't see anyone running. There's no desperation. They don't have your attention. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like, okay, the ball's out of the ballpark. We get some points. Now what? It's a much more exciting play to have a guy on first base and he tries to score on a double. It's immensely more exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's the way I feel. Not everybody feels the same way. But I think the game will start heading in that direction as people realize that, being a patient bat isn't, it's not going to help you against the best of the best arms. And I'll tell you, as arms get better and better and better, which, that's eventually, arms are going to get better in sequencing. Arms are not going to get better in velocity. So I want to be very clear there. But as arms get better at sequencing and, break and throwing break for strikes, players who are not as balanced at the plate, coordinated at the plate, they're not going to be able to hit nearly as well. They're going to get a lot more ground ball outs and all sorts of those types of things. Infield fly balls are actually, automatically even more, they turn into outs at a much higher rate than even ground balls do. It's just, not a lot of people can keep them in the infield as infield fly balls, but it is a skill that some people can do. But the point being is, as we get further and further even into analytics, into understanding how analytics play, we're going to start getting away more and more from players who are the 3 true outcomes, I think. Because once the game is put on to the idea that those guys can't hit the highest levels of pitching, everything will change.
Mm-hmm.
Everything will change.
How do you think it's going to change?
I think that those players will stop being sought out and valued by the high spenders.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the high spenders will start going out and getting players who are well-rounded, who can make big plays in big moments, who are aggressive, who are bad ball hitters, elite base runners, elite athletes. In some cases, teams will really prioritize what I call unicorns. Guys like, we talked about it earlier, guys like anomalies, like Judge, or to a lesser degree, Yandy Diaz. But, guys who are so atypical in how they produce You know what I mean? That pitchers have a hard time
Mm-hmm.
figuring out how to pitch to them and keeping to the same approach versus subsequent batters. Tampa Bay does it very well. They have a bunch of guys that are very unique, and each of them are destabilizing because they have to be pitched to uniquely because they're not like anyone else. And having guys that are like that, you can't execute each way of getting them out. You're going to give them a pitch to hit. So if you can have enough unicorns throughout your lineup who are true talent unicorns, so long as you have a balanced team, you should be fine in this era. I just think that, as we progress through the game, there's going to be less people who are like the Joey Gallos that exist in the league. There's still going to be guys who are lefties that do that. I think that the righties that do that will become less and less and less. The three true outcome righties.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, if they do show up in the league, they'll show up on a team like Tampa Bay. They'll come up for a year. They'll do incredible. And then the next year, they'll only be able to hit, the opposite handedness. Righties hitting lefties, lefties hitting righties. And then I think the year after that, unless they overhaul their entire swing and approach and commit massively to either aggression or patience, hopefully aggression, because it's a lot more consistently successful to initially commit to aggression than, initially commit to patience if you don't have power. Then those guys are going to be out of the league. I don't think their careers are going to be very long in the future. Oh, what a great play by Christian Vasquez. I'll tell you, Christian Vasquez has got to be one of the best defensive catchers that I have seen in a very long time. Can't hit at all. But
can't hit at all.
Yeah, and the thing is that he hit. I believe it was the juice ball year, and he hit a little bit. I think it was the year after that, but like, it was mainly like an approach thing. And before that point and after that point, he hasn't hit anything. He doesn't have proper swing mechanics because he can't use his lower half in the way that he needs to use his lower half. His upper half is fine. I don't have a problem with how he uses his hands. It's just he's not going to ever be able to properly drive the ball without using his lower half properly. It's kind of a shame because he's so good defensively that, like, if he ever figured out offense, I mean, he'd be one of the better guys around. But hey, look, catchers typically figure out offense later on. Case in point, look at Mike Zunino and Gary Sanchez right now. Both of them are like 28, 29, whatever. And now they're figuring it out. They've been in the league for years. So, Chris, what do you think? Next time we go on, you want to give the update of our player list? Can't hear you, buddy. Did the thing again.
What keeps happening to my mic? I'm like
disappeared.
I like go on a roll. I'm like, no, I would totally actually love to do that. I feel like the player list has we haven't talked about it for a while, and yeah. I would love to actually talk about it again. It's always interesting.
I'll tell you,
talk about the player list.
What's really funny is that if we're looking at the player list in the position players, right, on the list, my success rate is higher than it's ever been. But because of Spider Tack, my success rate plummeted after they banned it. Because you could never figure out which pitchers in the league were using it and which ones weren't. So I may not have the best rate this year now compared to last year. But if we look at the players who, like, I don't know, weren't pitchers, I have the best rate I ever had. So that's cool. And it's just, pitching was not my expertise before the season, and I had to catch myself up on it.
But you did well, though. You did really well.
Yeah. I did really, really well. But I think now that I've had a whole year with it, again, it's been a while since I did pitching. And now that I understand how Spider Tack's really influencing things, I feel like I have a really solid grip on pitching. And not just pitching in terms of where the pitchers are at now, but what those pitchers are going to become in subsequent years. Because it's important to be able to look at a guy and be like, okay, this guy may not be an ace now, but I've seen what he can do. I can see he's having a down year. He has time to recover, figure things out, build back up, whatever. I'm going to invest in this guy long term. I'll give you like a quick example. Tristan McKenzie has not found the strike zone in the big leagues or in AAA this year. Jesus Luzardo hasn't been the same guy as he was in the minors in years. Okay? I'm keeping those guys on the edge of the list. I'm keeping those guys on the edge of the 300. They're on it. They're on the edge, but they're on it. And they're terrible this year. But do I think that these guys are going to be aces for like 5 years plus when they figure it out? Absolutely. And I don't think that that's a player that you can afford to walk away from based on one down season. And that's something that I got really good at doing with projecting out for hitters. So the fact that I'm starting to round out for those types of players with regards to pitching is really, really good.
You've definitely gotten better when it comes to pitchers and everything. And at least you're like humble about it, and you talk about like you weren't good at rating pitchers. You weren't. And I feel like when we first started doing the podcast, you weren't even really into pitching. No, like not at all.
Yeah, because my mentor was mentor is not exactly the right word, but like I learned a few of the bigger tips that I've learned throughout the years, at least from professionals, from Bob Quinn, former Yankees, Giants, Reds GM. And his whole thing was, if you're going to work in a major league front office, specialize in something. Very few people specialize in everything. So for a few years, I just specialized in understanding the process that hitters go through. And now I'm able to throw back pitching into it because I've caught myself up so much with regards to hitters that I don't come across a hitter that is not on my radar. That just doesn't really happen. So I've now focused on pitching, on trying to figure out, who are the best pitchers in the big leagues, who are the best relievers in the big leagues. And now I'm trying to figure out, okay, well, this guy may be this in this role, but what if I take him out of the starting rotation and I put him in the bullpen? Will he be, one of the better relievers in the game if I do that? Because a lot of the time, former starters make the best relievers in the game, and then you might even have a better relief list than just a list of relievers. So that's a project I'm currently working on. But like even in addition to that, guys who just have down years because they're figuring out how to pitch at the big league level, sometimes you just got to hang with a guy, and they'll eventually come around. Sometimes you have to send a guy back down to the minors to work on a couple of things, and then they come back up and they've completely figured it out, like Roy Halladay back in the day. So, I'm trying to make sure that I have as well a rounded view of pitchers as I have for hitters at this point. And I'll tell you, including that on top of, I was doing hitters in the big leagues and, including the pitchers in the big leagues, but also the fact that I do the minors. I mean, my lists are majors and minors. It's the best of professional baseball. I have to keep track of the draft every year. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot to manage. It's definitely a lot to manage. But, we can go over this in our next one. We've been on for about 2 hours. Let's wrap this up. We'll see you guys on the next one, right?
Yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one.
Like, subscribe, come and join us on these things.
Yeah.
We love when people send in these messages.
Yeah, well, we do. We really love the interaction. We love it when people talk to us and everything, tell us what's going on, what their favorite hot takes are. I love that Travis always stops by and he talks about his hot takes. Love it.
Yeah, maybe for Travis, since he keeps stopping by, we'll do an episode on the Mariners. We'll talk about the Mariners. You know, and if more people want to stop by and they want to talk about their teams, maybe we'll do an episode of American
Yeah.
Team. More people that come by, more we're inclined to talk about their.
I love that idea. I
Oh boy,
absolutely love that
here's
idea.
the Stanton commercial.
Oh.
Yeah, pick him up like he's Altuve. Pick him up like yes, yes, yes.
This is actually really funny because it's like we came full circle. We
Yeah.
started out the live stream talking about that commercial, and now we're ending the live stream.
It's perfect. We'll see you guys next time.
We'll
Like
see
and
you all
subscribe.
next time. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you get notified